A 76-year-old grandmother was humiliated in front of dozens of passengers. What the airline didn't realize was that she had the power to hold them accountable, and she did. They say you can tell a lot about a person by how they carry a coat. Gloria Jefferson didn't toss hers over a shoulder or carelessly drape it across an arm. She folded it with precision, the way she had for more than 50 years, ever since her first job as a systems engineer at a now-defunct aerospace company. She wore a pale blue silk blouse tucked into charcoal gray trousers, pearl earrings glinting softly beneath the airport lights. Her silver hair was pulled into a smooth, no-nonsense bun. No flashy jewelry, just a slim gold band on her right hand and an old Timex watch she still wound by hand each night. She looked like someone's grandmother. And she was. But she was also someone else entirely, someone the airline staff hadn't recognized. She looked around. A young man 2 rows behind her was already engrossed in his tablet. A flight attendant offered her water, which she accepted with a nod. Everything felt routine. Smooth. Until it didn't. As more passengers filed in, Gloria reached into her wallet and unfolded a well-worn photograph. A young girl with bright, joyful braids stood beaming beside a science fair display board. Gloria smiled. That was Brielle, her great-granddaughter. The reason she was flying to Savannah. Brielle had just won first place in her district's robotics competition, and the city was honoring her. She had begged Gloria to be there. Gloria was gently tucking the picture back into her wallet when a second flight attendant approached her row, this time accompanied by a man in a navy blazer, tablet in hand. His expression was tight, impersonal. "Ma'am," he said, avoiding full eye contact, "could I ask you to step off the plane with us?" There was a pause, but then the attendant nodded, retrieved the leather satchel, and handed it to her. "Thank you," Gloria said, her voice steady. Then, without looking back, she stepped off the plane. She walked calmly down the jet bridge, flanked by the man in the blazer, who still hadn't introduced himself. At the gate podium, he gestured vaguely. "We'll find you another seat. Shouldn't take long." Gloria looked at him for a moment, then quietly stepped aside. She pulled out her phone and made a single call. "Ruben," she said as the line connected. "We'll need to take another look at the funding distribution for Tarmac Air. Something's just happened." She paused, listening briefly. "No, I'd rather not explain over the phone. Just be ready when I land." She wasn't venting. She was documenting. Times, names, statements, omissions. A few feet away, a man named Daniel Kurtz sat beside his wife and children. He leaned over. "Isn't that the same woman they just took off the plane?" His wife narrowed her eyes. "Yeah, and she looked like she was in first class. Think she did something wrong? Doesn't look like it. Just old." Nearby, another woman traveling alone quietly raised her phone. Someone in the gate area quietly raised their phone and took a picture. By now, the murmurs had begun to spread. Elsewhere, hundreds of miles away in a quiet office just outside Baltimore, Reuben Dillard was already moving. He had opened the Jefferson Family Trust's internal funding database and pulled up every line item related to Tarmac Air. It didn't take long. Over $137 million invested in the past 4 years, funds earmarked for carbon reduction, aircraft retrofitting, personnel development, and environmental compliance. Gloria had personally signed off on nearly every transaction. Reuben leaned back and he didn't need coffee. He didn't need to consult legal. He needed access to their cloud repository and the exact wording of every agreement tied to Tarmac Air since 2018. Above his desk, a framed photo caught the edge of the light. Gloria, years younger, standing confidently beside a retired Air Force One. Reuben had taken that picture himself. She had been the only woman in that room, and the only person who had read every technical spec cover to cover. He dialed her number. She answered on the first ring. She was seated now in a quiet airport cafe, past security. No checked luggage. Just her satchel, a cup of tea, and the same posture she brought to every boardroom. "I'm listening," she said. "Of the $137 million we allocated to Tarmac over the past 4 years," Reuben began, "more than half went toward emissions-related upgrades. But there's something strange in the tech reporting." But one message stood out. "I think we just pulled off Gloria Jefferson." Daryl stared at the screen. He reread it. Once. Then again. "The Gloria Jefferson?" He typed back, heart skipping. "Please confirm. The Gloria Jefferson?" The response came immediately. "Yes. Exec team is panicking. Her foundation funds our biggest environmental programs." Daryl was already on his feet before he finished reading. His chair toppled behind him. Within minutes, he was dialing his VP, then legal, then public affairs. Meanwhile, Gloria was texting Ruben again. You ever heard of someone named Marissa Wen? Doesn't ring a bell. What? She just emailed me. Says she works admin at Tarmac. Saw internal chatter about my removal. Someone used the word optics and said there were too many non-premium faces in the front of the plane. Ruben didn't reply right away. Then, do we have her number? We do now. That same afternoon, in the break room of Tarmac Air's headquarters in Des Moines, Marissa Wen sat nervously stirring a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. She hadn't meant to get involved, but the email thread had left a pit in her stomach. The way they spoke about the passenger, like she was a nuisance, a minor problem to quietly resolve. Like she didn't matter. Marissa didn't know who else to reach out to, so she found the email for the Jefferson Family Trust and sent a message. She hoped someone would read. Marissa exhaled, tension slowly leaving her shoulders. I just didn't want this to be another thing that gets swept under the rug. It won't be, Ruben promised. But while Ruben reassured her, Gloria had already begun drafting the letter that would change everything for the airline, for Marissa, and for anyone who had ever been quietly dismissed. By sunrise, the letter was printed, reviewed, and signed in blue ink. Gloria didn't trust digital signatures for messages like this. Told you this was coming. You don't shove a woman like that off a plane and expect her to vanish before dinner. Business media had begun to pick up whispers. Ruben had quietly tipped off a few trusted reporters, not with headlines, just with confirmation. Enough to establish the story was legitimate. By the following morning, a business wire ran a headline that read, Prominent philanthropist freezes $800 million in airline support after onboard incident. The article didn't include a photo, just a name, an asset estimate, and a brief mention of what had happened. But that was all it took. Social media didn't wait for the rest. Footage from Flight 218 began circulating. Shaky cell phone videos captured Gloria standing, collecting her things without protest. Another angle caught her calmly asking the staff for the supervisor's name. In one clip, a passenger across the aisle could be heard saying, "She didn't do anything. Why are they removing her?" The clips spread rapidly. Thousands of shares in under an hour. Commentaries followed. Threads analyzing the footage, speculating about motive, dissecting the silence around the removal. One post from a sociology professor in Oakland read, "The most formidable force in this country? A composed black woman with wealth, memory, and principle." Gloria said nothing. She didn't tweet, didn't issue a statement. That afternoon, she had tea with her neighbor. That evening, she helped prepare documents for her church's scholarship committee. But elsewhere, pressure was mounting. A retired aviation executive, Clara Beecham, published an op-ed in the Salt Lake Chronicle. She'd worked with Gloria decades. The emergency airlift logistics she quietly overhauled as a defense consultant. The university scholarships she funded under 5 different aliases, so no student would feel spotlighted or indebted. She didn't build her legacy for attention, Clara wrote. She built it to move things forward. Back at Terran Air's headquarters, the atmosphere turned tense. 3 board members called for an internal review. One quietly floated the idea that Renshaw should step aside, at least temporarily. Investors were alert. Their sustainability report was due next quarter, and their reputation, built on equity and clean tech, now hung in doubt. Some employees, including Marissa, felt a quiet sense of justice. Not out of malice, but because, for once, it felt like someone powerful had been held accountable. Like someone truly paid attention. By Friday evening, news anchors were saying Gloria's name without hesitation. Talk shows discussed corporate ethics. Analysts debated whether the brand could survive a trust collapse. But Gloria? She was already packing again. A different flight this time. One where no one would question her place. No one would silence her or treat her like a mistake. When she arrived at the airport in Savannah, there were no cameras waiting. No reporters. Just the salty scent of Atlantic air and the sound of her heels echoing across clean tile as she wheeled her overnight bag toward the exit. She hadn't spoken publicly. Not once. But across the country, a conversation had started, and she had become its quiet, undeniable center. By that evening, the footage had reached national airwaves. It played on every major news segment. Anchors called it a moment of national reflection. Talk radio lit up. Some callers, how often has something like this happened to someone without influence or a platform? During a transportation committee hearing in Congress, a senator from the Pacific Northwest referenced the incident. He didn't name the airline, he didn't need to. He simply said. When multi-billion-dollar corporations forget that the public is watching, eventually, someone reminds them, softly or otherwise. Meanwhile, in a high school lunchroom in rural Alabama, a teenager named Brielle Jefferson was pulled aside by her teacher. Brielle, your great-grandmother. She's all over the news. Brielle blinked. For what? The teacher turned her phone toward her. Brielle stared for a few seconds, then smiled faintly. Y'all don't know her like I do, she said. Back at corporate headquarters, Terranair's stock had dropped 7% by midday. Their PR team rushed to release a carefully worded statement filled with polished vagueness. We regret any miscommunication. We are actively reviewing internal procedures. We remain committed to equity and respect in all operations. It didn't. Inside, as Brielle reheated leftover gumbo, Gloria sat at the kitchen table with her daughter, Lorraine Pierce, Brielle's grandmother, and a retired school principal. They really had the nerve to lay hands on you? Lorraine asked, disbelief flickering in her voice. After everything you've done? It wasn't personal, Gloria said gently. Lorraine raised an eyebrow. Didn't feel impersonal. They didn't know who I was, Gloria added, sipping her tea. That's the problem. They didn't care. The three women sat down. No cameras, no reporters. Just gumbo, cornbread, and 3 generations of black women who had all learned how to carry injustice without surrendering their dignity. Across the country, the story refused to fade. Civil rights organizations released statements. Advocacy groups amplified Gloria's letter. In Washington, young staffers and policy offices passed screenshots of the letter between themselves like sacred text. Online, her quote, "We must ensure a shared commitment to human dignity," became a rallying cry, printed on graphics, used as banners. Even in places that normally looked away, people noticed. A retired baggage handler in California watched the news and turned to his wife. That could have been my sister, he whispered. At the airport in Charleston, a ticketing agent slipped a handwritten note into the carry-on of an older black woman traveling alone. It simply said, I saw what they did to Ms. Jefferson. That won't happen here. While the nation dissected the headlines, Gloria wasn't watching any of it. She was seated on the floor beside Brielle, who had just pulled a tiny robot from a shoebox and was excitedly explaining how it used sensors to avoid bumping into walls. The press conference? That wasn't Gloria's idea. In fact, she tried to turn it down. She had declined twice. But Reuben called her early Monday morning. Gloria, he said gently, people are finally paying attention. You have a chance to guide the moment, not just respond to it. She didn't give an answer right away. Instead, she asked, where would we even do it? I've had offers, D.C., Dallas, even Los Angeles. She paused. No. If I'm going to speak, it'll be at the Civic Center in Macon, Georgia. That's where I gave my first talk back in 1974, when folks still said a black woman shouldn't be explaining satellite telemetry to anyone. Reuben smiled on the other end. I'll make the arrangements. That Thursday, Gloria stood behind a simple wooden podium at the Macon Civic Center. The crowd wasn't huge, just local residents, a few students, and a row of journalists. No glittering signs, no media circus. Just the banner of the trust and the state flag beside her. There were no attorneys flanking her. No spokesperson. No script or teleprompter. She spoke plainly. I didn't come here to get revenge, she said, steady and calm. I came to remind us what we've let slip. Respect isn't something you earn. It's something you're owed. People leaned in. Phones lit up. Cameras rolled. I was removed from a flight. No explanation. Just a vague phrase dressed up to sound official, but empty enough to sting. I didn't scream. I didn't resist. I made a phone call, and that call reminded a billion-dollar corporation that dignity doesn't forget. She paused, not for drama, but to breathe. We make too many excuses for institutions that mistreat people. We say they didn't mean it, call it a mix-up, hire a consultant, and move on. But what if? What if every quiet dismissal mattered? I wasn't the first this happened to, she said, and I won't be the last. But maybe next time, when a gate agent sees an older black woman with a boarding pass, they'll pause before assuming she doesn't belong. She stepped back, gave a small nod, and left the stage. No press conference. No backroom meet and greets. Just her truth spoken, not performed. That evening, a local journalist named Tasha Rowe wrote a piece for the Macon Register titled Gloria M. Jefferson didn't raise her voice. She raised the bar. It spread fast. Clips from the speech ricocheted across the internet. Celebrities quoted her. So did organizers, teachers, EMTs, janitors, and small-town mayors. Even airline staff started referencing her in training sessions. Policies began to change quietly, but meaningfully. Terran Air, still feeling the financial hit, released a second statement. This time it named Gloria directly. This time it apologized. The money was gone. But the damage wasn't about numbers. It went deeper than that. Ruben called again the next morning. "You saw the coverage?" "I didn't need to," Gloria replied. "I said what needed saying. That was enough." "You realize you're a national figure now?" She chuckled. "I've been a national figure since 1983. They're just catching up." In Savannah, Brielle looked up from the breakfast table. "Gigi," she asked, "do you think you'll fly again?" Gloria smiled. "Of course I will. You don't need to shout to be heard. But when your moment comes, speak with such clarity that silence stops being an option." The morning sun spilled through the kitchen blinds as Brielle poured 2 glasses of orange juice. Gloria sat quietly at the table, her hands around a steaming mug of black coffee, watching her great-granddaughter with a calm pride. "No cameras today. No spotlight. Just life. You know they're still talking about you online, right?" Brielle asked, handing her the juice. "Let them talk," Gloria said. "They'll stop once something louder comes along. But don't you care how big this got?" "I care about you," she replied softly. "And the kind of world you'll grow up in. That's bigger than trending hashtags." Brielle hesitated. "Were you scared?" On the plane, Gloria looked at her for a long moment. "Not scared," she said. "Just tired. Tired of how quickly people forget your worth when they don't recognize your face." She leaned back in her chair. "You get to a certain age, and you think maybe, just maybe, you've earned your place. Then someone reminds you, you're still expected to prove it." Brielle nodded slowly. "But you didn't cry. You didn't yell. You just made one call." "That's the thing about real power," Gloria said gently. "It doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to know when to speak." The room went still again. Not empty, just full of something unspoken. Later that afternoon, Gloria took a walk through the local park. Kids chased a ball across the grass. A woman pushing a stroller smiled at her. Nothing big, just life, quietly unfolding. A teenage boy on a bench looked up from his phone. "Excuse me, are you Miss Jefferson?" "Yes," she replied. "My mom told me about you. Said you taught the whole country how to behave, without raising your voice." Gloria smiled. "Tell your mother I appreciate that. And remember this, if you ever see someone being mistreated, don't wait for permission. Just stand beside them. Sometimes, that's all it takes." He nodded. "Yes, ma'am." That evening, Gloria sat on her porch, a folded photo of Brielle resting in her lap. The moon was up. Crickets chirped. The picture had worn edges now from years in her wallet. She thought of all the women who had been silenced, who walked away with heads high, even when no one was watching. The ones who never got to speak. The ones who never had a platform. The ones who didn't have someone to call. She had carried them with her that day on Flight 218, even if no one else saw it. And maybe, just maybe, the next time someone writes a policy or drafts a protocol, they'll remember her. The woman in seat 2A. The one who folded her coat and left quietly. Because this story was never about punishing a company. It wasn't about a viral moment. It was about something more lasting. That when you carry yourself with dignity, and when you know your worth, the world feels it, eventually. So if you're reading this, whether you're 12 or 75, remember this.